Welcome to the Thea Lee podcast. Today is January 14th, 2026, and we are continuing day 14 of reading through the Bible. So now Jacob is settled back in the land of Canaan where he grew up. And we start to talk about the story of his son Joseph. Now, Joseph is Rebekah's son, and we knew that Jacob loved Rebekah more than his other wives. And it took them a very long time to have Joseph, so it talks about the fact that Joseph loves Jacob more than any of his other children. When we start this story, Joseph is about 17 years old, and because Jacob loved him more than his other children, he gives Joseph a gift of a special, beautiful robe. Now, his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more, and of course the gift makes matters worse. So we have sibling rivalry starting here again. And to make that even worse, Joseph starts to have prophetic dreams. The first dream he has is that Joseph and his brothers were out in the field bundling grain, and suddenly Joseph's bundle stands straight up, and the other bundles gathered around and bowed down low before his. So he tells his brothers this dream, and they're all very angry and say, "What, do you think you're going to be our king? Do you actually expect us to bow down before you, and you think you're going to reign over us?" And so it made them hate him even more. Then Joseph has another dream, and he says, "The sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed down before me." And he tells his dad and his brothers about this dream. So his father even says to him, "What kind of dream is this? Do you think your mother and I and your brothers are actually going to come bow down before you?" While it makes his brothers very jealous, his dad's actually kind of intrigued and wondering what these dreams mean. So soon after this, Joseph's brothers go to pasture with all of their father's flocks in Shechem. It's been some time that they have been gone, so Jacob decides to send Joseph out to check on them and then come back and give him a report about how things are going. So Joseph says, "I'm ready to go," and he takes off to go find his brothers. They weren't at Shechem, but he finds a man that tells him that they had gone forward to Dothan. So Joseph sets out to find them. Joseph's brothers see him coming from a distance away, and they know it's him, of course, because he has this beautiful cloak on. When they see him, they start to plan how they can kill him. They decide that they're going to kill him and throw his body into a cistern. However, his brother Reuben actually tries to come to Joseph's rescue. So he says, "Let's not kill him, then we will have blood on our hands and we will have the shame of what we have done. So let's just put him into an empty cistern and then he'll eventually die, but it won't be on our hands." So they do this. Joseph shows up, they rip off his beautiful robe, and they put him into a cistern. Now, right as they're sitting down to eat after this, a caravan shows up, a trading caravan that's going to Egypt. And so his brother Judah says, "Why kill him? Why don't we just sell him? He is our flesh and blood and our brother, so we could legally sell him, and then he's not our problem anymore." So they sell him for 20 pieces of silver. Now Reuben comes back later to get Joseph out of the cistern, and he's not there. And so Reuben tears his clothes, and he's very upset, and what am I going to do now? So the brothers take his robe and kill a young goat and dip the robe in the young goat's blood and send it back to their father and say, "Doesn't this belong to your son?" So, of course, Jacob is completely distraught, and he decides that his son must have been killed by animals and torn apart. So he is in deep mourning. Everyone tries to comfort him, but he refuses to be comforted, and he says that he will die mourning his son. So meanwhile, the Midianite traders that bought Joseph take him to Egypt, and they sell him to Potiphar, an officer of the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and Potiphar was the captain of the capital guard. Now we shift stories to Judah, Joseph's brother. Now, Judah's the one who had the brilliant idea of selling Joseph. But Judah leaves home about this time, and he goes and stays with a man named Hira, and he marries a Canaanite woman. He ends up having 3 sons, Onan, and Shelah. When is old enough to be married, arranges for him to marry a woman named Tamar. But is so evil in the Lord's sight that the Lord actually takes his life. So then Judah says to brother Onan that he should marry Tamar because the law of their people requires the brother of a man who has died to give his brother an heir through his widow. Onan marries her, but he's not willing to have a child that's not his own heir. So every time that he has intercourse with her, he spills his semen out on the ground to prevent her from having a child. The Lord sees this and considers it evil for Onan to deny his dead brother a child, so the Lord takes Onan's life. So Judah decides to send Tamar back to her family, and he tells her to go there until his youngest son Shelah is old enough to get married, and then he will send for her. However, he secretly doesn't want his son to marry her because he's afraid that he will lose his third son the same way the first two sons died. So a while later, Judah's wife died, and after his time of mourning was over, he goes to visit his friend Hira and supervise the shearing of the sheep. Well, someone told his daughter-in-law Tamar that her father-in-law was coming up to watch the shearing of the sheep. She was aware that Shelah at this time had grown up, but no arrangements had been made for him to marry her. So she changed out of her widow's clothes and she put on a veil over her face and sat in the entrance of the village. So when Judah came, he thought she was a prostitute, and he approached her and said, "Let me have sex with you." She asked, "How much will you pay?" And he said that he would send a young goat from his flock. But she said, "What guarantee can you give me?" And he said, "Well, what do you want?" And she said, "Leave me your identification seal and its cord and the walking stick you are carrying." So Judah gave them to her, and then he had intercourse with her, and she became pregnant. But afterwards, she went back home and took off her veil and put her mourning clothes back on. Later, Judah asked his friend Hira to go take the young goat to the woman at the gate, but he couldn't find her, and he asked around to the men of the town, and they said that they didn't have any prostitutes in their gate, so they didn't know who that was. So when he told Judah this, he said, "Well, I tried to pay her. I guess she can keep the things that I gave her." And he didn't want to go back and ask again because they would look like fools. About 3 months later, Judah was told that his daughter-in-law Tamar had acted like a prostitute and now was pregnant. So he was very upset, and he was like, "Bring her out and let her be burned." But when they went to get her to kill her, she sent these things to him and said, "Look closely whose seal and cord and walking stick these are. That is the man who got me pregnant." Judah recognized them immediately and said that she is more righteous than I am, because I didn't arrange for her to marry my son Shelah. So he never slept with her again. But when the time came for her to give birth, it was discovered that she had twins. One of the twins stuck out his hand, and the midwife grabbed the hand and tied a scarlet string around the child's wrist and said, "This is the firstborn." But then they pulled the hand back in, and the other baby was born first. And so she said, "How did you break out first?" So he was named Perez. And then the baby with the scarlet string on his wrist was born, and his name was Zerah. So Judah had 3 sons from his Canaanite wife, and they were Onan, and Shelah. Later, he had the twin sons from Tamar, and they were Perez and Zerah. So now we return to the story of Joseph. He is now in Egypt in Potiphar's household, and the Lord was with Joseph, and he succeeded in everything he did. His Egyptian master, Potiphar, noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph. So he put him in charge of his entire household and everything that he owned. From the day Joseph was put in charge, the master started getting blessed by the Lord. So all of his household affairs ran smoothly, his crops and his livestock flourished. So he really had nothing to worry about as long as Joseph was in charge. Now, at this time, Joseph was very handsome and a well-built young man. Remember, he was like 17 years old when he was sold into slavery. So, unfortunately, Potiphar's wife starts noticing him, and she starts lusting after him and trying to get him to sleep with her. Of course, Joseph doesn't do it. He's an honorable servant, and so he keeps trying to avoid her. But finally, one day, she corners him and tries to get him to sleep with her, and she grabs a hold of his cape. Now, Joseph runs off, but she has his cape in her hand. So then she yells to her other servants and says that, "My husband has brought this Hebrew slave into our home, and he tried to rape me, but I screamed and he ran off. See, I have his cape." So then, of course, Potiphar is really upset, and he throws Joseph into prison and leaves him there. But the Lord even remains with Joseph in prison and shows him his faithful love. He gained favor with the prison warden, and before long, he was put in charge of all of the other prisoners and everything that happened in the prison. Now the warden has no more worries because Joseph took care of everything. So the Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed. My takeaway today is that obviously God is with Joseph, but Joseph has to put in effort too. If anyone so far in the Bible has a reason to be upset or complain or make excuses, it would be Joseph. A lot of horrible things have happened to him, and he hasn't deserved any of them. It starts out and his mother dies when he's young, his brothers sell him into slavery, and then obviously now he's in prison and he hasn't done anything wrong. But obviously, Joseph stays righteous. He is a trustworthy, honorable person. He obviously is smart and works hard, and the Lord greatly blesses what he does. I think this is maybe the most applicable story I have read so far. So many times in our lives, something has happened to us that is out of our hands, and we use it as an excuse to either be lazy or calloused or angry. And obviously, Joseph isn't doing this. No matter where he is, even though all of these unjust things have happened, he obviously still does the next right thing. He's honorable and works hard, and then God blesses that. That is my takeaway for today. I hope that you all have a great day. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk again tomorrow.